So welcome to the session on the creator economy. Actually, I believe, in the 11 years that we've hosted this is the first time we've really focused in on this topic. And it's a very interesting, dynamic topic. We're really going to talk about three players. One are the brands. And brands are increasingly focused in thinking about how they're most effective in engaging their customers. And it turns out that things are changing and moving in such that this whole space of influencers are becoming increasingly attractive for brands to engage with. So that's the other component, which are the influencers, the creators, and there are thousands of them, millions actually, around the world. And then finally, the platforms, because this doesn't actually happen unless there's a platform that helps aggregate the viewers and the influencers and provide the medium through which they communicate and engage. And so we're going to explore these three elements of this really interesting and evolving space. And I'm thrilled, really, truly thrilled to have the panel today. They have built their careers in this space. They have deep knowledge and how it works. So the whole idea today is to have them share their insights and experiences about how this creator economy works and where it's going in the future. So thank you all very much for coming today. So let me start, and I'll just say your name and what you do, but I'd like you to just embellish a little bit to add, because that would be helpful. So Lindsey Gamble here is the Associate Director of Influencer Innovation at Mavrck, which is a platform actually based here in Boston, and he can explain a little bit more about that. We have Ansley Williams. She's the head of influencer marketing for North America at Ogilvy, which is a well-known company in this space. And then we have Heidi, Mika, who is the director for influencer marketing at Mekanism. And she's also had a career working for other companies doing similar work in this space. And then we have Jordan Yates, who flew in from Houston, who is a creator and is building a career in this space. So why don't we start with you and just say a few words about what you do, and that would be great. So
yeah,
go
for sure.
Lindsey.
First of all, excited to be here. Lindsey Gamble, I work for Mavrck, influencer marketing platform right here in Boston. We provide a platform for brands to use, to find social media influencers, communicate with them, brief them on campaigns, pay them out, report on that. And I'm part of our kind of in-house agency team where we support brands, mostly Fortune 500 brands. My particular role is really focused on the innovation aspect. So I spent 2 years running campaigns, providing strategy, and now it's really looking at the greater creator economy and figuring out how can brands drive innovation and work with creators in new and unique ways beyond just sponsored content. And then outside of my work at Mavrck, I write a newsletter breaking down the creator economy and really looking at the future and the trends and what it all means to creators, brands, and platforms, and viewers as well.
So just where can people find your newsletter? Because I follow it. I find it very, very valuable. So please let people know how they can find you.
LinkedIn, look up Lindsey Gamble. It's right on my profile. And then there's an email version too. But would love for anyone to sign up if you're interested in that.
Very great. Okay, so Ansley, you want to?
Yeah, you should definitely follow him. Actually, it's a really, really good newsletter. So I'm Ansley Williams. I've been in influencer marketing for probably about a decade now, and I was editing blog posts when I first started and contracting them. So I've really seen the space evolve over time. It's been really rewarding. Now I'm at Ogilvy, working on the PR side. So we work on a lot of integrated campaigns for our brand. So I'm able to see sort of the corporate risk side, the reputation management side, the PR earned media side. So it's been really interesting seeing it all come together. I think I'm extremely passionate now about AI and how it's evolved and changing the platform discussions, and coming from a social strategy background too. I think it's just really interesting how influencer marketing has tied in. I love creative storytelling and inclusivity. I'm really passionate about thought leadership. So we have some papers actually on Ogilvy that I've co-authored. So definitely check those out too. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here today and with these other individuals here. It's a really interesting space to be in, and yeah, excited to talk to y'all.
Fantastic. So Heidi.
Yeah, I think similar to Ansley, I've worked at a couple different agencies before. Actually started in PR. Prior to Mekanism, I was at a performance branding agency. And while Mekanism is a full service creative agency, they are traditionally creative advertising. So I've sort of seen it develop through these different lenses between PR, performance, creative. And excited to be here and chat with you more about the creator economy.
Fantastic, thank you. Jordan?
Hey guys, I'm Jordan. My official title is marketing engineer, but it's kind of a double entendre for me because by day I am an actual marketing engineer for a ceramic capacitor manufacturer, and I get to do a lot of research and very technical. But at my last job, I was in sales and I used LinkedIn as a sales tool. And one thing led to another after posting a lot of photos and videos of my products that I sort of gained a following to where I was recognized as somebody who could take technical content and make it more fun and relatable. So I became a content creator kind of on accident, and then it just sort of built into this entire business around it, where now I make content for technical companies like industrial automation, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. But it's really interesting to see a platform like LinkedIn that I love so much be able to be used in so many ways, because it's how I got the day job I have, and it's how I have my side business. So I love that we're here talking about platforms.
Yeah, so I reached out to Jordan because, our typical, I guess, stereotype is an influencer who does TikTok videos and this kind of thing. And Jordan's in the B2B space, which turns out is quite different in how you interact and attract brands and attract followers. But also, the style and the kind of expertise you need and the content is quite different. So we're going to talk a bit about the growth of B2B influencer marketing here today. But what I wanted to do first is kind of get the landscape out and understand the size and scale of the influencer marketing space. How much do brands spend? And is it a substitute? Is this substituting for advertising, or is it complementing? So we thought we'd start with Ansley, whose firm does analysis in the space and has a lot of statistics. So can you kind of walk us through the size and scale of the space?
Sure. So the creator economy is a $100 billion global industry right now, which is crazy to think about. When we're thinking about platforms and how much everyone's making in this space, it's really evolved and changed. So the stat for influencer marketing is actually, it's a $21.1 billion business, and it's up from $1.7 billion in 2016. So when you think about how it's changed and grown just in those couple of years, it's really just grown exponentially. And there's about 2 million creators that are making this like their main source of income just by creating content for these platforms. And when you think about how many creators in the space, there's 50 million creators. So there's a lot of people, there's a lot of money in the industry. And I think when marketers are thinking about how they're spending their dollars and thinking about where they're spending their dollars, it's really moved from TVC, banner ads, all of those types of advertising channels to influencer marketing. So we've been talking about this, and there's a lot of different studies out there, a lot of great studies, and it's about 25 to 40. We've seen that range % of digital and marketing spends in terms of influencer marketing. And we're seeing that number grow, especially in B2B too. I think that there's a lot more growth, exponential growth in that space too. I'm sure Jordan can attest to that. But yeah, the space is changing, it's growing, it's evolving. There's so much money being spent in this area, but there's so many, I think, smart ways to work in this industry too, and so those are developing and best practices are emerging, and yeah, it's becoming a very sophisticated space.
Interesting, cool. So we're gonna dig into actually like how it works. So Lindsey, can you give an example of like how you organize a campaign, what kind of brands come to you, and then when they ask for advice, how do you structure these things?
Yeah, the great thing is that it's evolving, but if we think about kind of like the basics of influencer marketing, or really any digital marketing campaign, you want to set your goals. What are your KPIs? What are you hoping to accomplish? Especially when it comes to influencer marketing, that plays an important role because, if you want to drive brand awareness versus conversions, you're going to go with a different strategy. You're going to figure out, what social media platforms I need to be on, or what other, adjacent platforms that campaign is going to be run on. What type of creators should I pick? Is it the micro creator that is, continuing to have a moment, or is it the big macro or celebrity creators that, maybe they have these huge audiences, but since they're less relatable than the average person, maybe they're great at getting reach, but not necessarily driving engagements. So once you kind of figure out the KPIs and you select the platforms you want to focus on based on the goals and objectives and the creators, you really want to dive in. And one of the things that I think is happening more is like co-creation with creators. So typically, not to speak for everyone I worked at an agency too, but we'll work with a brand and we'll come up with kind of a campaign concept and a brief, and we'll deliver that to creators. But I think now we're seeing more brands bring creators in that process. So it's working with them to come up with the campaign concept with the talking points and the guidelines and those different things. Once you kind of negotiate with creators on the scope of work and the deliverables, they go out there and create the content in whatever format they have, and post that content. And then, it's reporting and optimizing what, hopefully you set some benchmarks, some forecasted numbers at the beginning so that you can start to measure that and see how it performed. And sometimes you overperform, sometimes you don't. And then you really retweak and optimize for the next campaign. Obviously, that's a very fast version of it. But I would say that's the typical structure with some more details that are more nuanced.
Gotcha. So Heidi, do you have like a database of these influencers that you tracked? And then are you recruiting them to join your platform because you promised to match them with brands? So how does that process work?
Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of platforms or SaaS tools similar to Mavrck. We, at the moment, use a different one, but I've used several before. And these tools, they do provide this vast database that we can, filter based on criteria. So, who are we looking to target? What types of influencers? What does their audience look like? Where are they based? What platforms are they, best to create content on or have the most followership on? We also have our internal, proprietary network that we have, over the past decade built. And that's a big part of it as well, kind of building those relationships, not just with the creators themselves, but maybe with their managers, or there are several influencer and talent agencies that rep multiple creators. So kind of building those relationships and being able to reach out and say, hey, we're working with X brand, they're looking for X type of influencer. Do you have anybody that would be a fit? The SaaS tools are great when you do have that basic criteria, but sometimes there's criteria that is not necessarily shown on their profiles. For example, we're working with a financial institution, so not everybody is sharing which bank they're with or where their retirement funds are. So having those personal relationships and being able to ask those questions is really important as well.
Gotcha. So Jordan, you come from a completely different perspective on all of this. So, are you looking to get signed up by one of the agencies, or are you fine doing it independently? I'm kind of interested in your strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, I think from a creator standpoint, it would be so much easier if you had an agency sign you up, because then they seem like they handle a lot of the, I guess, paperwork side of it and get you going. That would be nice, because with my customers currently, it is a lot more I meet them through LinkedIn most of the time, and they reach out to me. I've never had to sell myself. It's always they come to me and they're like, I like what you're doing. Can you do that for me? And so I don't know. I think it would be very advantageous to use a company or a firm like any of the three that they work for. And ideally one day, if I make it to that level, it'd be great. But I do see both sides of it. And the way I'm currently going about it is just, on my own, and I still like it.
I'm thinking you should come here during the regular semester and do the room would be packed with students here at MIT around this B2B space, which seems to be kind of an interesting, kind of underserved space, because you need this quirky set of capabilities to be able to do it versus some of the crazy things they do on TikTok. So,
Absolutely.
Ansley, so how is the B2B space emerging here? Do you see this as an interesting opportunity, or is it just sort of this niche that you need kind of unique people like Jordan to fill?
I think it's expertise based, right? It's more niche when you think about the influencer or the expertise that you're looking for, right? So if you're in mechanical engineering or something like that, you want someone that can talk shop and that can talk about that. What's interesting about B2B is the platforms are very different, and how people consume content and your audience is actually very different. People usually think it's just LinkedIn, but there's so much more out there. Like one of our top performing pieces of content in the B2B space was the long form video with the most interesting man in insurance. That's how he coined himself. Yes,
I've heard that line before, right?
Yes, right. And that video got 10,000 views in like the first 24 hours or something like that. And in the insurance space, that's viral, right? When you think about it, like that's a very niche industry. But that long form YouTube content is where people were really spending their time. So when you're thinking about a B2B campaign, you really have to think about your content strategy too, and where your audience is. One of the other places that have worked super well for us is podcasts too. And then you can get a lot of data on podcast subscriber, and it's really easy, I think, it's a lot easier to see who you're actually talking to, what their roles are, where they are, and how the information will be applicable to them.
Gotcha. So you mentioned co-creation and innovation. So what are you seeing out there in terms of, I guess, tools, capabilities, and maybe even gaps where people aren't understanding what's going on?
Yeah, I think working on a platform, we want to automate and streamline things, but platforms don't always allow for innovation. So I think a couple of people have mentioned this already, is like the first step to innovation is really connecting with creators. They're the experts, they're the ones that know what platforms are hot, kind of where culture is, what's resonating. And so I think a really first step is like understanding the landscape from them, where are they spending their most time at, how are they leveraging TikTok? Is it being in a way that's different than what we as average users, are using it? So really kind of using them as the experts to really guide what platforms you should be on, what type of campaigns. And that can really evolve into what I love the most is really, creator advisory boards, where you not only work with creators on sponsored content, but you have, a dozen or so creators that you basically use like a corporate, boardroom where like they're giving insight on everything. And then that can lead into, new ways of bringing creators to the mix. Right now, everything is so focused on social media platforms and having creators create that content on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. But you can really integrate creators on every type of platform. For example, a Yelp, not a platform that you would think about creators, but if you think about Yelp, it's a user-generated platform. A brand could easily have creators create content, video assets, which they now allow, and use that as ads. And so you think about where can I insert creators into the different touch points with consumers and people that you're trying to reach. And then the other thing around innovation is what's really interesting is how creator content is being integrated across a lot of different advertising formats. So TikTok's doing a great job of this, bringing creative content to bigger screens. So now when you go to the movies, you can see TikTok content that's curated. Before a movie, you can see it on Redbox, which is the latest. I was pumping gas, now they have TikTok videos. Yeah, which is really interesting, right? And so we're seeing creative content, social media content expand beyond the mobile devices. And the benefit as a platform to advertisers that now you can run ads with that content that people are already gravitating towards, as opposed to commercials where we're probably getting up and leaving the room during a commercial or looking on our phones.
Sure. So Heidi, the platform scholars and regulators think that platform equals monopoly. But what I'm hearing here is that there's a huge array of platforms to go engage. So how do you think about this? Do you think that there's a restriction of opportunities to choose different venues, or is this one big monopoly that we all have to worry about?
I don't think it's necessarily a monopoly, and it's kind of interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the talent themselves were talking about their platform. So even though they have social media platforms where they've built their platform. This is sort of their podium to share their messages and talk to their audiences. So while I think the social media platforms have been, that stepping stone, it doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to need them. We're seeing different social media platforms pop up. I think we'll talk about it later, but Threads, for example, 70 million users in like 10 hours is pretty crazy. So I don't think there's necessarily a monopoly. We'll see things change, new platforms come up, but I think the creators themselves, and we're seeing it right with some of the bigger creators, like they're creating their own brands, Mr. Beast, Emma Chamberlain Coffee. So they're not going to be reliant necessarily always on the platforms.
Gotcha. But I would imagine as a creator, Jordan, that you spend a lot of time building your community on a particular platform. So if one of these guys came along and said, actually, we have a brand and we would love you to do something on another platform, you're going to be like, should I make the effort? Isn't that a bit of a concern in terms of how much investment you make in a platform and then the optionality that you want as a part of your career?
Yeah, I, for one, feel like, thank you, because I feel like you're trying to sell me to them, and if one of you guys don't sign me afterwards, Peter will have failed. But I think that for me, I'm biggest on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the market I understand because my customers have their customers on there. So like in the B2B space, LinkedIn feels like everything, whereas I guess Instagram, TikTok, and all that feel more B2C. And I've done some campaigns on Instagram, like a lip gloss ad once, which I'm not a lip gloss expert. Sure, I'm a expert in other things, and that's typically what people pay me for. But it can be uncomfortable when you step into a different platform because you have to adjust to their kind of algorithm, their layout. And TikTok and Instagram, they're very similar in what tracks well, but it's so different than what you post on LinkedIn. So if LinkedIn went away, I would just feel like I had like the carpet just like pulled out from underneath me because that is where I'm good. I don't see where my customers are and like where my value is translating in the same way to Instagram. I could pivot and I could do something else, but my main income, it happens to be LinkedIn because that's a very technical community there. So I do rely on it existing, but we do things another level deep. I think one of you mentioned it doesn't just stop at LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's not paying me, but we make these videos and we'll put them on YouTube and then we embed them into emails. So I feel like emails, I don't know if that counts as a platform, but to me it has the highest ROI and directness to who you're talking to. So I think if you can diversify the platforms you're utilizing with the same content, that's kind of the sweet spot.
Gotcha. So continuing on this theme of innovation, we had a discussion this morning on AI. Are you tracking that? How do you track that? How do you see that? And I'll start with you.
Yeah, everything is AI. I think from a very kind of basic standpoint, AI is a great opportunity for creators to really streamline the processes. So everything from ideation, I think that's kind of the really like low-hanging fruit where, instead of having to come up with a caption for, an Instagram post or a TikTok post, you can now kind of pop it into ChatGPT or any other kind of similar tool and get a starting point. You just like anything with AI, you have to tweak it, but it's a great brainstormer. And I think, when you're able to speed up your process, then you can focus more on what most creators probably want, is creating content. I think what's really interesting from the brand perspective and like agency perspective and platform perspective as well, which I've been thinking about and probably will write something on this, is just how Meta, even TikTok, Microsoft, all the big tech companies are now building AI tools for advertising. Gotcha. So, creators have been a great source of getting assets to amplify for paid media campaigns because the content really resonates. And now with these tools, they can, instead of getting 100 pieces of content from creators, they can get 5 or 10 and then plug them into these new ad tools and then spit out different variations of that in a matter of time. And it's a hit to creators because not that they're no longer needed, but now there's another option. Instead of having to pay out a bunch of creators, now you can get a couple of assets and then remove the background to have that asset fit, with seasonal content or different things like that. And so I think that's going to really change the relationship between creators and brands. And for creators, I recommend thinking about how AI impacts your rates and usage, and kind of continue to evolve and figure out how to still kind of adapt to that changing of the guard, bulletproofing your business.
So it's kind of interesting. You mentioned the co-creation. It's not just the influencer and brands working together, but it's the influencers working with AI to co-create, which is kind of interesting. And people have talked about AI giving superpowers. I see somebody in the audience here who's talked about this capability of AI to be an amazing enabler. Have you seen kind of characteristics of influencers that are kind of really embracing this and really kind of stretching the envelope and becoming more productive and more effective and attracting more brands to them? I can see some people are just on the wave, right, and riding it hard. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I would say especially in the YouTube space, I think podcasts, I would say like a lot of the business, like B2B influencers actually, right? Because they're kind of in tune to kind of technology and whatnot. And I think just from the optimization, like, we're all smart in here, but like, it's hard to beat the algorithm. It's hard to beat the data. And so I think, whether it's creators or just general, instead of pushing back on where we're going, it's like you have to embrace that. Myself with a newsletter, I still write my content, but I'll use AI to figure out the best, subject lines and whatnot, even though that takes away from the creativity of it. But that allows me to churn out more content, which I imagine creators are doing. And then the aspect too is, I think along with that is just, all the platforms are embracing it. And so it's like, you gotta go where people are going. And I think it's better to be an early adopter, and maybe you wasted time being an early adopter as opposed to getting left back. We've seen that with Blockbuster and Netflix and so many other scenarios around that.
Yeah, I was reading a bit about the debate over the Emmys and whether or not they should award for the best music, AI-generated music. And I'm wondering, in the creator space, are these IP issues coming up at all? And like, who owns this content? Is it the brand because they've sponsored this project or a campaign? Or is it the creator who owns the content? And have there been disputes, or is this a space where those issues don't really matter so much? So.
It definitely comes up, right? Usually brands have a license to the content that influencers or creators create. And so they'll have a license to use it in a set amount of channels for a set length of time. So there's a huge legal side of influencer marketing in the creator economy, right? There's contracts to look at, to review. So that's what I would definitely encourage too, is if you're thinking about influencer marketing or running a creator campaign, definitely get legal involved. There's a lot that you can put in a contract that are able to talk about usage and all of those different things. I think that IP will be a huge discussion. I think just in general, the AI is facing a lot of regulatory issues right now. I think we just saw the FTC is coming down on OpenAI, just as I think of today. And then we're also facing, I think, regulation in terms of transparency with the consumer, right? So when influencer marketing emerged, there was no direction on how you disclose that it was a monetary partnership, right? So it was #ad, #sponsored, and then the paid partnership tool came along, and so it was on the platforms almost to provide something that provided a disclosure on influencer marketing.
So are these norms, or are these actual some sort of mandated regulation?
That's interesting that you asked that, because FTC actually had like some guiding lines, but now they have more. And then at Ogilvy, we are pushing the AI Accountability Act, where there would be a watermark. And so you can actually disclose that it's AI generated. Also, virtual influencers have came on the scene. It's just, there's a lot to talk about in this space, but I think it'll face a lot more regulation.
Gotcha. So I would imagine, hearing you speak, Heidi, is this kind of a must-have for agencies to be effective in this space, is really building capability and being able to show customers that you know how this world works?
Yeah, I think the best advice that I've been given about it is not that AI will take over our jobs, but people who know how to use AI. will take over our jobs. So I think, for me personally, not something I'm necessarily super interested in, but I've forced myself to utilize ChatGPT, OpenAI, DALL-E, just so I understand how to use it and put it into practice so that I'm keeping up with the trends and understand how to use it. I think it's the same thing with creators too. They'll find ways that it will help them in their workflow, not necessarily completely rely on it and take all the creative out of it, but find ways that they can utilize it and help them along the way, which I think two things will help with burnout across the board, and kind of leave more time open for brainstorming or those personal relationships, and kind of take those lower level, more admin tasks out of their day-to-day.
So Jordan, do you use AI in your?
Oh my goodness, yes. So the way Heidi described it was so on point. So it really helps with workflow. So for example, I'm a podcast host for the Energy Pipeline. It's a new podcast with Caterpillar, and they want to do short social clips. So Riverside is where we record our episodes. And there's something as simple as AI tracking of who's talking. So if there's multiple people on the podcast, whoever's talking, will be that person in the frame, and then it'll switch. So if you want to go edit a video and make a reel afterwards, you just download a section and you do like speaker AI, and that way it flips back and forth for you. Or else you're laying out multiple clips and you're having to like manually copy and paste back and forth. So things like that, it just saves so much time. But it's not like Riverside could record the episode for me, be me, have my opinions, and then emulate me and then go online and pretend to be me. So it's like, I don't see it as a threat. I see it as just a tool. And things like adding captions to videos, I use an app called Captions, and it's AI, again, listening to what you're saying and putting the captions there. It used to take me 30 minutes to make a reel with captions. Now it takes me, I don't know, a minute and a half. And so I feel like AI really enables you, and the platforms then reward it because platforms like consistency, and they like you to have a little bit of like brand continuity. And so the AI just really enables it.
Yeah. So it sounds like also from what you're saying is that the platforms themselves really need to be astute and understand what the creators need so that they're building the right tools. And the creators have to do a lot behind the scenes to get this content out in a way that's attractive, it's effective. So we tend to just see the final kind of cut version, but understanding how to use these tools and not get bogged down, because building just one little clip video can take you hours of time. So I was in Paris a couple weeks ago or months ago now, and I had a long conversation with a woman from L'Oreal, and it was super interesting. And I asked her about how you use influencers and this thing. And she said that they're working on building a creator academy. I thought that was pretty interesting, and so I wanted to see if you guys have run across brands like L'Oreal who are realizing this is not a fad. It's going to be a long-term way in which you allocate your engagement dollars, i.e. advertising, and the influencers, I guess you could say, oh, wow, you're going to co-opt them, but actually you need to educate them. And L'Oreal, it turns out, has laboratories around the world. They have dozens of PhDs working on all sorts of things, and there's a lot to learn about a large company like L'Oreal, and I would imagine many others, especially like in B2B marketing. And so it sort of made sense to me that they're going to invest in creating an academy that it then would bring in people to expose them to these companies, because these companies have their facade and their brand image, but behind the scenes, they're actually doing a lot. And that's probably what they want to show to the world. And I was wondering if you had heard of other companies that aren't just picking out a creator to get an audience, but actually are building a pipeline of people who really understand that company and not necessarily feed them the content, but at least show them what's potentially the types of things, because I would imagine if you go through an academy like that for L'Oreal, it would cause the creator to think about all sorts of interesting ideas about what they could create content around. So I don't know if you've run across companies that are kind of investing in the creator economy, not just tapping into it.
Yeah, I can start. I think a lot of companies, Disney, ESPN, Burt's Bees, there's a lot of companies out there. And that touches upon kind of what I was talking about, where like creators as consultants, but also I think about influencer marketing and creator economy similar to like the workplace. You're a company, you have a sales team, you want them to drive revenue and sell things, but you have to empower them. So that's why I think which is great about those kind of types of initiatives where like, all right, we know you're the experts in creating content, but as a marketer, as a company, we have access to all this data or these resources or these great thought leaders that have been in the industry. Let's expose you to them and help you be a better content creator, because when we work with you, that means you're gonna create better content. But I also think it's important to really focus on helping the creators too, because ultimately the brands that creators gravitate towards are the ones that are helping the creator economy and helping creators as a whole. If you look at anything around the social media platforms or brands being called out, creators are a community that they'll call those brands out right away. And when, if your brand's not creator friendly today from a working standpoint or just from a platform standpoint, as we see, like you're not gonna be a brand that people are going to support, because as a creator, you're a new generation entrepreneur. And we love the story of people starting their own businesses and going out on their own to make things happen.
Gotcha. So it'll be something we'll have to watch. Does Caterpillar create a creator academy? We'll know that.
I feel like I need to start one, because it's funny with what I do. It's not necessarily that it's just me in videos. Like I have co-hosts that aren't as experienced. Like I have customers where my customers are in the video with me. We're trying to amplify their brand, not just translate it through my personal brand. So I have to tell you, like I have so many engineers I have to put on camera, and I have to coach them of like, hey, calm down, or hey, look at the camera every now and then, or like, it's okay, like we can edit later, and they're just drenched in sweat and they're just freaking out. And you guys have probably met some engineers. We're not always the most personable. So trying to get them on a camera and then make it good enough to where I can then sell this product to my customer. I feel like I have an academy sometimes, and it is very difficult because there's so many people that learn so differently, especially in the technical community. So, I love this idea. I didn't realize this was an actual thing. I think it's so smart, not just because I'm doing it, but I'm just kidding.
Oh, I don't think the B2B companies are doing it, but some of the big brands and the consumer. But I think it should migrate because, as we discussed this, you're sharing technical information or deep knowledge about it, so helping the creators in that space. So we talked about AI as kind of a superpower. Obviously, data can also be a superpower, and so Heidi, I was wondering, sort of help us think, and understand what kind of data you collect. I know when I post on LinkedIn, I love to see which companies have checked out but it's not detailed enough, and so I'm actually quite frustrated, because I want to know not just how, the largest number of hits from a company. I want to know down to, an individual company, but in any event, they limit my ability to see that, and I'm wondering if you guys may have super duper tools that you subscribe to or are able to capture data that really helps you hone these campaigns that you run. So I don't know, Heidi, can you start?
Yeah, I would say we don't necessarily have tools, but that is sort of the beauty of influencers and creators, because you can leverage their audiences and their audience data that sometimes they have because it's their own platform, as opposed to what the social media platforms are providing, whether it's through Google Analytics or Meta. Right, we might see those high level numbers, but we're not really getting into the nitty gritty of like total clarity on the same way that the influencers can provide from their own data. I think we're gonna see that soon when we go cookieless too. A lot of the platforms are gonna lose a lot of the audience data that we currently have access to, but the influencers can kind of be a solution for that.
Interesting. So Ansley, do you have any things to add on data?
I think relying on relationships is really smart in terms of the tactic, and I mean, we have to sort of follow the platforms and what they're allowing us to have access to. Like a lot of the platforms, like the SaaS platforms that we use, the tools that we use to be able to find influencers, we can vet and filter down to like the demographic level, like every single different box we can check and really get granular with how we're matching up with our audiences. Even interest segments, and AI, I think, really helps power some of that too. Like they can now clone video for caption and words and everything else, so that's been really interesting to see. But I think as they close and change their privacy preferences too, there's definitely going to be a shift in how are we able to access the right customer through that data. So it's going to be interesting to see for sure.
Okay, so let's turn a little bit to the future. And we've seen the rise of new platforms emerge, and some of them can get tens of millions, hundreds of millions of customers very, very quickly. We've seen with Threads. Can you speak briefly to what Threads is, and then just kind of looking forward, do you see more and more platforms emerging, or is it a consolidation happening as we heard earlier today?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine most people have heard of Threads. It's been everywhere, but it's basically Meta, Instagram's Twitter competitor. So very similar structure. I wouldn't say it's a copycat because the conversations that happen on there today are a lot different. But it's been really fascinating to see, how fast they've grown. And I think a big part of them getting to 100 million users in 5 days is because they leverage the Instagram ecosystem. And so we see there's so many different Twitter competitors out there. That's the platform that everyone's trying to, compete against because some people want to move off of it. And what the challenge is for the other ones is that, when you join them, you start at 0 followers or zero whatever. And so we're seeing, Meta really tap into its user base and ecosystem that's already huge. And so going through a couple of steps, using your username that's on Instagram, you can sign up, then people that follow you on Instagram can follow you. And so you can, there's people having, 100,000 followers already, or like a Mr. Beast that has 1 million just based on his Instagram following. And so I think that aspect is really unique when we think about decentralization, being able to take your followers from one platform to another platform where you're not so fragmented on like, hey, I have a big following on TikTok and now I have to start from net zero on Instagram, even though I have this following. And so I think when it comes to these platforms, one big trend I've been looking at is how these big tech platforms are launching standalone platforms. Mm-hmm. And so this is a great example, but it's not just to gain a lot of users, but it's to fill a certain need, whether that's a certain type of content. We've seen TikTok do this with a platform called Lemon8, which is like Instagram meets Pinterest platform. And so while it's two different platforms, it's a way for them to capture an audience of their competitor without overbloating TikTok. And so I think the standalone platforms is something that we're going to see a lot in the future, especially from the main players, as a way to kind of expand their user base, drive more revenue, right? And then, meet users where they want to be and give them optionality for the platforms they're on.
Cool. So we're running short of time, but just run down the line. Where do you see the creator economy going? Are you bullish on this, and are you seeing it fragment, or are you seeing it tap out and plateau and maybe get more centralized? Just interested in your thoughts on the future of the creator economy.
Yeah, I think platforms will incentivize creators, and I think that will be more widely used, right, across many different platforms, and there'll be a way to, I think, incentivize. Like before, I feel like influencers and creators had to work with brands to be able to get those brand deals and to make income, but now that they're being incentivized to create content by the platforms, I think that they'll be able to have a little bit more creative control over the stories that they want to tell and what they want to create. I'm seeing a huge focus more to micro influencers and more niche influencers and B2B and expertise really shining through. So I think that'll continue to happen. And I'm sure that we'll be talking about AI 3 years from now, probably on a similar panel, and talking about just the evolution and how it's evolved.
Super.
Yeah, I'm definitely bullish on it. I think we just continue to see it grow and grow and grow. An interesting stat is that in 5 years, most of the workforce will be Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who have grown up in a technology and social media age. So I think it'll just continue to be a part of the marketing mix, similar kind of how PR, people kind of were not nervous about it, but didn't really understand the value of it. And now you have a chief communications officer and PR team on every brand. I think we'll see a similar evolution of creator and influencer marketing.
Very good. And Jordan, you get the last word.
Oh, lucky me. Yeah, I just think that as we're getting more technological as a society, that social media, it's coming, it's more relevant, and it's just going to get more and more traction as it goes. And I think creators are a natural part of that. And I like how brands are embracing it. And I think being online is here to stay, and the platforms will evolve, but it's going to be something similar, and I don't see it going away necessarily or fading out.
Great. Well, I said that these folks had a lot of deep insights into this space, and I think they've shown that today. So everybody, please join me in thanking our panel today. Great. Thank you very much.
That was awesome.